I believe that everyone's individual perspective is so important. Figuring out how to approach it from your unique perspective, you just have to kind of like carve that space for yourself within a given topic or genre.
Tune in as we give flowers to Black men and women making waves in the audio industry. I'm your host, Sidney Evans, and this is Beyond the Threshold. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Beyond the Threshold. I'm your host, Sidney Evans, an award-winning audio editor, mixer, and producer. For those of you who don't know, on this show, I interview Black men and women working in the audio industry to highlight the lessons and experiences it takes to achieve success in the field. I want to thank you all for tuning in to another episode. We got another amazing guest on tap for today. And as I usually do, I'm kind of going to just jump right into things. But I do have a bit of a story before we get there. So in either 2021 or 2022, I was commissioned, or to simply put it, I was asked to speak at Black Podfest in Atlanta to lead an audio engineering panel. She had a panel. She was a panelist too. And she led the sound design panel. And I said, okay, I'm going to check that one out. That was one of the ones I had highlighted that I wanted to check out. And during the session, I was like, okay, she's got a unique sense of humor. Oh, she knows her stuff. She's creative. I was like, as she's going, I'm just like, all these like interesting things, she brought up and kind of introduced. And so I said, okay, I'm gonna follow up with her. I had made a list of people that, that I found interesting that I wanted to connect with afterwards. So when I got back, I did that, reached out to her, like hopped on a quick Zoom, just introduced ourselves, what we do, just kind of get to know each other a little bit. So I ended up following her on social media. And I would say probably within that first month, she was providing like all these resources for creatives, whether it's audio or other fields. And she posted a link about an associate producer role. So I clicked on it and I was like, I don't know. I felt like it was just like for me, like it was just like, this is everything I'm looking for the full time. It was very creative. It was edgy and it was cool. So I applied, forgot all about it. Maybe like a month later, they hit me up. I interviewed and I ended up getting the job. So if all those things hadn't aligned the way they did, I would have never got that opportunity. So I said all that to say, she's a great resource for people looking for jobs, looking for opportunities. And we're going to get more into that in the episode. But to give a quick background on her, she's a creator and arts advocate based out of Atlanta. She earned her degree in music recording technology from Hampton and master's in sound design from Savannah College of Art and Design. She participated in the 2019 Spotify Sound Up Podcasting Accelerator program. And she formed the production company Could Be Pretty Cool, whose mission is to produce unique creative experiences to inspire community building through the arts. She has also served as a theatrical sound designer, arts administrator, and speaker for local and national artists and cultural organizations, amongst a ton of other things that we may or may not get to throughout the course of the interview. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the guest for today, Kacie Luaders.
Hi, Sidney. Thanks for letting me on your show.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining. I saw you posted on your LinkedIn that you are in high demand for interviews right now. So I'm glad you was able to squeeze me in.
Oh, no, it's not even, I think it's more of like everyone in the summertime trying to just push everything until Fridays. And so Fridays over the summer, I'm just talking to people all day. So very happy that we're doing this on, what is this, a Wednesday? On a Wednesday.
It is. I was going to say, this is a Wednesday. So hopefully you're in better spirits than all the Friday interviews. It seems for some reason, like you just mentioned, most of the ones you do on Fridays, it seems everybody's scheduling on Wednesdays for me. So I feel like it's a good, you kind of over the reality of the beginning of the week, but you're not checked out enough towards the end of the week. So I feel like Wednesday is a good day. So I feel like I'm getting the best interviews out there. So hopefully this will stand out a little more than all the other podcasts. But as I mentioned in the intro, you have done a lot of amazing things, specifically to audio, but from a creative capacity as well. So just wanted to kind of first start off early. Like what was young Kacie like, and then how your like educational experience and things kind of led up to you like going to college at Hampton and eventually Savannah Arts and Design, and kind of focused on like audio, music, sound design, all that type of stuff.
Absolutely. So young Kacie was a total weirdo, which probably should come as a surprise to no one. But I always loved music. I have seen old VHS tapes of me when I could like barely sit up, but I was trying to like crawl towards the family record player or the tape player, because I'm just like, what is that? Like, how is that making these sounds? So yeah, I started piano lessons when I was 5. Wasn't very good. Started guitar lessons when I was 10. Wasn't very good. Switched to bass when I was 14. Also, the pattern continues. So I wanted to be in music. I wanted to tour with groups. I wanted to eventually in high school, when like kind of the big superstar producers, the Pharrells, the Timbalands, like were getting more attention, I wanted to be a music producer. And so I went to college for music recording technology, because I'm like, yes, I too can do this. But you have to have talent to succeed in the music industry, everyone. Piece of advice number 1. And so I quickly learned, I'm not a music producer. I'm not a musician. I'm not good at this, but I love sound. I love audio. And so I quickly moved to learning more about the engineering side. And through a series of bizarre events, the music department at Hampton was in the same building as the theater department. And someone was just like, hey, you're in the music program, right? If you ever want to come and learn about like sound design for the theater, we're always looking for people to do sound. Like no one in our department wants to do sound for some reason. And so I was like, okay, we'll see what that is. And that was really my first like, oh, you don't have to do music to work in audio, but you can still be creative and you can still create, emotions and support stories. And so that for me was my first like, oh, I can be good at something in audio. It just doesn't have to be music.
So after your time in college and going through that experience, like what was the process like for you, like transitioning into the working world? Like, was it easy? Did you have an opportunity right out? Did you kind of have to, grind your way, like do this on the side while you work to provide for yourself? I know a few of our guests, including myself, kind of had to be able to do multiple things at once to try to, keep the dream going. So what was that like for you?
Sure. So when I graduated, I was still a pretty stupid 22, 23-year-old. So I ended up moving back home, and I was working in the box office at a museum back in Michigan, the Henry Ford Museum. And I wasn't sure what my next move was going to be in audio. This is 2010 at this point. So we're just coming out of like crazy recession, and graduating with a music degree and a theater minor was not the move at the time. So I'm just kind of like, oh, I don't know what's happening. So I decided to go back to grad school, which, as you mentioned, went to Savannah College of Art and Design in Savannah. And that was really where I had to like focus up like real fast. Like undergrad was a hot mess. Grad school, it is no like, maybe I'm not going to go to class today because I partied too hard. It's like, no, you're going to miss so much stuff if you don't show up. So I was showing up. I was learning from professors who were dope, peers who I, in another space, like might have been intimidated by, but because we were classmates and peers, being able to see that I could compete with these folks, it was just a huge confidence boost. And so I would say it wasn't really until after I graduated from grad school that I had both the confidence and the desire to actually like push and figure out what I wanted to do. What I thought I wanted to do when I finished was I thought I wanted to work in film location sound. So I moved to Atlanta in 2013. And I did get on a few sets here, a few like commercial sets for like the Children's Hospital, a few like web series, and I'm booming and, doing these long days on set, and quickly learned I kind of hated that too. So that was another step in the figuring out what I didn't want to do journey. Cause yeah, you got to be on those sets at like 4 or 5 in the morning, and then you're just there all day long. Anywho, so yeah, eventually I started actually telling people here in Atlanta that I had a master's in sound design, and I had some interest in theater, and I'd done some live theater in undergrad. Started getting a few internships, apprenticeships, and eventually, I think it was 2016, 2017, got my first professional live theater sound design job at the Georgia Ensemble Theater in Roswell, Georgia. And from there, my career was like half still doing kind of like admin for arts organizations to like pay the bills, and then doing live theater sound design throughout theaters in Atlanta.
Do you still do like live stuff at all? I would assume you have transitioned, if not completely or close to completely.
Close to completely. I think what is going to be my last professional show here in Atlanta is a show called The Wash, which is at the Impact Theater right now. And I'm going to be doing some stuff at Emory. But yes, I am close to being fully finished with theatrical sound design.
You don't think you'll, like, once you officially retire, like, there's always that urge, like, people will reach out to you, like, yeah, we got this opportunity. Would you ever consider, like, if it's, like, such an amazing opportunity that's, like, there's no way I can turn this down, would you consider it under those circumstances?
There's a possibility. That's kind of how I'm back this year. I didn't do any shows last year in 2023 because I was like, yeah, I'm done. I did 2 shows in 2022 just because everything had been, shut down and people were just starting to like reach back out again. But yeah, it's a different type of time commitment than podcasting. I would say, like, we can do so much virtually with podcasting. With live theater, you have to be in the space. You have to be at the rehearsal. You have to go to the, and so doing that in addition to doing podcasting, it's just like never stop working life, which I'm no longer about as I am continuing my journey into my 30s. So yeah.
Yeah, and we're gonna get into, obviously there's that when you're young and you really gotta hustle. There's a season for us, like you just gotta try to get as much done as possible, whether it's working 2 jobs or pulling all-nighters or kind of doing what you gotta do to get your foot in the door. But then there's a transition to when you start getting a little bit older, that you gotta strike more of a balance, and it's not about like not wanting to do the work, is that so you're in the right space to do it efficiently and effectively. And well, I'll touch on that a little bit more as we get, a little further in your story. But I do want to back up and kind of transition into where you were doing the admin art stuff to make a living, and you were doing like live sound design, live stuff. When did podcasting come on your radar? And
I've heard about podcasts, and I had friends from the sound design program who were starting to jump into podcasts, and really they were the ones who were telling me, like, circa 2016, 2017, like, this podcast and stuff, like, it's going to be really big, it's going to explode. And I'm not someone who listens to a lot of stuff for recreation, right? Because, we always got the cans on. I'm always doing something. I wasn't listening to podcasts at the time. I was like, okay, whatever. So in 2019, one of the artistic directors at a theater that I've worked for before basically just shot me a DM and was like, hey, I don't know if you do podcasts, but Spotify is doing this thing for women of color to like basically workshop and learn about podcasting. And, if this is something you're interested in, like, you should try it. So I applied. Again, I didn't know what I was doing or talking about, but fortunately, I would say because of my audio background, I did get in. And so I want to say it was August of 2019, went out to the Spotify headquarters in New York. It was myself and 9 other women. We just kind of learned like crash course about so much about podcasting and kind of workshops an idea for a pilot for one of our own shows. But yeah, I came back home and was like, okay, cool. That's a great thing for me to know at some point, and went back to my day gig and didn't think about it until 2020.
So maybe like a year later was when you were like, okay, I'm going to apply what I learned at this accelerator and try to attempt to create something. So what was that first thing? Because a lot of times in people's stories, because I'm a big junkie on like, biographies, documentaries, like learning the process of how people got to where they were. And interestingly enough, like the thing that they blew up on is usually not their first attempt at, whether it's somebody who's home over a record label, they might have signed an act that didn't sell anything, but you never heard about it. So you think, like the crisscrosses and the TLCs, like you hear about them and you're like, oh, okay, this is their, like the first act that they signed and it blew up. It was like, nah, they probably had a lot of smaller acts that didn't work out and weren't aware of it. But now because they're successful, we think, okay, they just jumped to it and it just went from A to Z just like that. So what was the first thing that you produced, and was that in fact the first thing that kind of got you on the radar once you made that transition into podcasting?
Sure. So the first original podcast that I made was like a 3-episode limited series thing so just to kind of step back a little bit, April 2020, got laid off from my full-time day gig because of the pandemic. And then at the time I was on like maybe 4 theater shows, and of course everything shut down. So I literally had nothing to do sitting in the house. But my alma mater, SCAD, they put out a call to do a virtual like alumni fellowship basically. And they were like, we can run this fellowship, but we can't go on campus. So if someone has an idea, an alum, for an art project or a media project that can be done virtually, you should apply. And during this time, in addition to pandemic, this was also the summer of, the racial reckoning, sitting in the house all day watching that. It was just like, I would like to do some sort of project about this. And so my pitch to them was a podcast called White Angle, where I had a white documentarian who had made a film about some sort of Black injustice. So, whether it was something that happened in the past, something that was current. And I paired them with a Black filmmaker. And it was basically just a time for them to have a discussion. The Black filmmaker will watch the white filmmaker's movie and they could just have a conversation, because my, theory was, if you're in that world and making a film, but you're not of that culture, you do definitely have a perspective as an artist. But what kind of like conversation can we have about it? Like no name calling, no shade, as just people to really like dive into what being a storyteller about a culture that you don't belong to actually means. And it was chill. Everyone was respectful. Everyone was, walked away hopefully feeling like, oh yes, this was a great conversation to have. So it was done sort of like an academic project in a way. Wasn't released widely. It was just on like a little standalone website. But that was the first thing where I actually was like, I have an idea. I'm going to pitch my idea. I'm going to find people to cast in this idea. I'm going to edit it. I'm going to publish it. That was my first podcast.
Okay. So, a word that's standing out to me is pitch. So a lot of times as just creatives focus more on the creative and the technical, and obviously there's a lot of writing involved, but that's kind of, working in the thing. But the pitching part is like a whole different beast in itself. And I don't know if the stars just aligned for you properly or what, but it seems like once you enter things, once you have to apply for things, like it just works out for you. So is there something in particular that you learned or that you found particularly helpful that has assisted you when you are presenting your pitches that are getting the responses and the leading to the opportunities? Or is it, I don't know, just like your knack for storytelling? There's something there that you have that other people could benefit from learning about or you highlighting. So I'm curious to know for myself, but I'm sure the listeners are curious to know as well. Like what is it about pitching that makes you stand out from the crowd?
So I would say pitching is definitely, it's a little art, it's a little science, it's a lot of luck. For every successful thing that I have pitched or every successful program I've gotten into, I guarantee you there were 10 or 15 rejections that I got beforehand or at the same time. So what I'm learning with audio specifically is I try to figure out, first of all, like, who am I talking to? And if they were to give me money, support, a platform, how is this going to benefit them the most? Because, I mean, real talk, no one's going to give you anything unless they're going to get something from it. And then the second thing that I typically try to do is I try to, like, if I come up with an idea, I try to just do, quick little Google and see what other people have done about the same topic, and then try to go in a direction that hasn't been approached before.
You got to come of it. You kind of try to come through it's like guerrilla warfare.
Yeah, a little
like
bit.
Like you kind of see where like, okay, this is what they're expecting. So let me go off of that.
A little bit. I've never thought of it as guerrilla warfare, but I mean, I guess in some ways, yes, you don't want to pitch something that already exists. But I also, a lot of people say like, oh, we don't need any more podcasts about this because there are already, 100, 1,000 out there. I believe that everyone's individual perspective is so important. And so if you find a subject or a topic that like everybody's already talking about, figuring out how to approach it from your unique perspective and in a way that other people aren't approaching it, you just have to kind of like carve that space for yourself within a given topic or a genre. And so, figuring out how to do that is probably my next thing. And then I will say, just trying to... I realize if there's something with like applications and you got to write essay questions and, people don't want to read a lot. So how can you say what you want to say to grab the attention, to make the point as concisely as possible, I would say is a big thing to figure out because they're not trying to read a lot.
But the editing is the most important part. Like you have like, in order to make it concise and it's not just word vomit and, make sure you're not overusing words or whatever. Like if you don't have to be the greatest at the original idea, but if you edit it very well, you can present yourself in a much better light. It's for somebody to absorb it and be concise and not check out what they're reading it. So I did want to share that. But you also mentioned carving a space for yourself. So we're going to jump ahead to You Heard Me Right, which is, you mentioned your first production, but I feel like this one is the kind of the one that was like, okay, I got something. It was accepted and appreciated more widely than the first show you mentioned, which was White Angle, you said?
That is correct.
Okay. So yeah, explain like the idea for You Heard Me Right, the process, and like, I guess the accolades, the reception that you got from it. And what was it like, navigating all, from conception to the production to putting it out and marketing it and allowing people to consume it to where it was appreciated?
Sure. So yes, as I mentioned, being a part of the Spotify Sound Up Accelerator, we all developed a pitch for a show, a podcast, and pitched that at the end of the program. And so the top 4 pitches in my cohort received funding to make a pilot episode of their show. We were not one of those top 4. So again, it was just kind of like, oh, this is great. Great experience and opportunity. Maybe at some point I'll do this show, but back to reality. So this was another sitting in the house, 2020, when I had gotten back from the program, I said, I'm going to try to make this eventually. So got a couple of my friends together, did a very bare bones, scratch version demo of what you heard me write could be. And I put it away for months. Didn't do any editing, didn't tell anybody. It was just okay, whatever. So yeah, I'm sitting in the house. I was like, well, I'll edit this. I'll send it back to the folks at Spotify from the program. Really, I was just looking for notes because I didn't know what a podcast was. And this was actually even before White Angle started. So I literally was just bored, coming up with ideas at the same time, and things started going in production later that year. But yeah, sent the demo and somebody got back to me and was like, oh, we like it. We want to pick it up, but we're shut down for doing productions because, pandemic. And so they were like, if you can figure out how to do it, then sure, we'll distribute it. So I think I would say a lot of my training in theater came in handy with the figuring out how to do it part. The show you heard me write, it is a art making podcast where we have groups of 3 working on a project together anonymously, and then they come together and talk about it live for the first time on the show. And we knew that at the time we couldn't just bring groups of people into a recording studio because pandemic. And so basically, I was like, if we can't figure out how to do this outside, everybody 10 feet away, y'all gotta remember, this is 2020, June, July, when just everything was popping in the whole thick of it. We didn't know what was going on. I was like, if we can't figure out how to do this safely, I'm not doing it. And so it was a combination of my team, myself, and then Spotify for actually letting us do it. Well, they were like, okay. So we found an Airbnb outside of Atlanta. We set up mics and everything outside in the backyard. And we had people come in straight through the backyard. We recorded the episode, the first season, you hear all the ambiance because you can't edit that out.
I want to pause because I want to highlight something. It's interesting how sometimes where there's lack of resources or the particular circumstances you in allow you to be more creative than you maybe would have otherwise. So just think about, for example, the creation of hip hop is okay, well, Black people live in the city, inner city, we don't know none of us how to play instruments. And even if we did, we don't have access to the actual instruments to get everybody come in and record, do all this type of stuff. So it's okay, well, we're just going to, we all our parents have all these soul and funk records. We're just going to sample them and then just add our twist to it. And within that, they birthed the most popular genre of music that everybody thought was a fad, but look at it now. So the fact that you were able to be creative to be able to get it recorded and done outside, and then you can hear the ambiance, that sets a whole different tone and mood to it than if you're in the studio and it's just silent. Because it kind of creates more realism. It kind of puts you in the space more. It's more immersive. So I'm sure that added an element that wouldn't have been there otherwise had it, it not been pandemic, if it would have been under no circumstances. So I just wanted to add that. Sorry to interrupt you. You may continue.
Oh, no, you're fine. I was just going to say, that's definitely what I meant by I think a lot of the live theater kicked in because there's zero money in theater. You will be poor, everyone listening, if you go into theater. And so that's kind of what I was used to. I was used to working with shoestring budgets. I was used to, people well, we can't afford this prop, so we're just going to have to take this thing and stick a feather on it and imagine that it's a chicken. That's kind of a lot of the approach that I bring to my podcasting, which in some ways it's like bad. You're not supposed to approach your stuff with a scarcity mentality, but it's more of like a resourcefulness, to your point, of having to figure out how to make it happen. One day I would like to not have to do that. So if anyone just wants to like write me checks to do things, I will accept that.
An unlimited budget would be preferred, but we can make it work otherwise.
Exactly. Like I would not complain, but yep, figuring it out somehow is a superpower of many creatives.
Okay, so was that what led you to, get all this like media news coverage and stuff? Like, I know you've been highlighted in a lot of things, me being, the curious and wanting to be as most prepared host that I can be, had to do my research prior. And you have been highlighted in a lot of publications, platforms. As I mentioned earlier, you're a highly requested guest for other podcasts as well as this one. Is there something that was an area of emphasis that you wanted to get PR and coverage on the type of stuff that you're doing, or did it kind of happen organically?
I would say it was probably a combination of just the fact that it was like a Spotify show that certainly didn't hurt, with the fact that it was something that was kind of weird and different. And so if nothing else, I think people maybe checked it out to be like, what is this? So yeah, I think it was a combination of factors. But really in some ways I was just happy to, again, go from I have an idea to we're going to make the thing to we're going to put it out. And then all the other stuff that came after was like bonus, but actually figuring out how to do it, I think, was the highlight for me.
There's no other way to do it but to do it. So to fast forward a little bit to what you have going on now, could be pretty cool. Was this, during the time you heard me write, was this an idea that you had at all? Like, were you kind of making notes, putting it away, coming back to it, or was it something like, okay, I'm done with this. I've squeezed as much out of the Spotify produced, you heard me write, and it's time to move on to the next thing? Or was it something that you had kind of laid a soft foundation for, and you knew that it would be something that a time would come where you would have to focus on it?
Yeah, great question. Definitely more of the soft foundation. I went to a panel in Atlanta of like women in tech. I went for the free food, but I actually listened to the panel, and all of them said something like, while you have your full-time job, that's when you work on your side hustle. Like, don't be quitting your full-time job to like go head first into the thing that's gonna make you poor and unhappy all the time. Like, build alongside your whatever. And so I was like, oh, that's a good point. I don't actually have a side hustle, and I don't know if I want one, but I should probably have one. I think I'll start one. So yeah, I think December of 2019 is when I actually like registered like my LLC. And again, I did not know what it was going to be, but I was like, this could be pretty cool. That's what it's called now. So I had the bones in place to be structured, again, as an LLC. I did the business bank account. So I, on paper, was a business, which once I did get laid off in April 2020, and once things started happening, it almost was kind of like perfect timing, because even the program that I worked, where I was a fellow at SCAD, my school, they were like, oh, do you have an LLC? In order to provide, funding and support, you have to be an LLC. And I was like, oh, I just happened to kind of have one of those, I guess. And so it really wasn't until around the time all of this was happening where I was like, oh, I should probably like have a website. I should probably start getting the handles on the social places. So it was a lot of building the parachute after I'd already kind of jumped out. And, to your point, after 2020, 2021, 2022, the opportunities started not being as plentiful, I will say. Now I have this thing that I still own, that I now have some projects under. And so it was time to figure out how to actually leverage this into a business.
Okay, so yes, highlight as far as like the how you laid it out to actually be a sustainable business. Break down what exactly is like the mission and the goal for could be pretty cool. And well, I guess in explaining the mission, you'll get into the fusion of the audio storytelling and data analytics, which I'm extremely curious about because that world is a bit unfamiliar to me as far as combining the audio and the data. So could you break that down?
Sure. So, yes, initially the mission was like, keep letting corporate media people write us checks to make our own stuff. But that was not a sustainable business plan. And so, what we do now primarily is we work on podcasts for organizations. So we're working on a podcast for Bard College, which is in upstate New York, working on podcasts for nonprofit organizations. And we really sort of shifted our business focus from just like, let's make Kacie's creative projects to let's figure out how to make podcasts a way for organizations to tell stories about their organization, collect research and data about their organizations, but then to be able to share that out in a way that isn't just like, we wrote this report that's in a PDF on our website. We're making data-driven content. And so that's right now the what keeps the lights on piece. But we also now have an in-house podcast we produce, Could Be Pretty Cool News, which is a podcast that's all about creative entrepreneurship on the journey that we were on, that we're still on. Just met so many fascinating people, graphics people, writers, people who do styling and fashion, and everyone has like a different story, but a similar story when it comes to trying to stay creative and trying to stay in tune with like what's happening artistically, but also trying to figure out how to write invoices and contracts and do taxes. And so the entire premise of the show is just talking to folks either who are experts in the creator economy, academics, people who, you know, work in like ecosystem building spaces where they're collaborating with a bunch of creators, and then also telling narrative stories of different creators and how they got started, what they're doing, their views on just how this life can be sustainable for us all maybe one day. And so that's like the passion project that I'm really enjoying right now. That's led to different opportunities. I wouldn't say from the podcast itself necessarily. We have a very modest audience, but people who do tune in, you know, or know that it exists can say like, hey, can you come teach this workshop? Or, hey, can you come, you know, do this other thing? So it's been okay. It's been fine.
So that's amazing. Two things. I think it's I'm glad you like this podcast obviously is highlighting Black men and women in the audio space specifically. Yours is more broad from creators in general, which I'm glad because, you know, could be pretty cool. News. You need a cover art. Okay, you need somebody who can do graphic design. Obviously, you have the audio chops and I have the audio chops. So, you know, we cover a large portion of that in itself. But people have a background in marketing. You have to market the podcast, and not even just with our platforms. Whatever business you're doing, like you have to be a media company now. Like you're gonna have to have a creative storytelling aspect of your company now. So like to merge them, to have all those people intertwined in one environment, one setting, I feel like it's beneficial for all. And then also, a lot of the times, like you're so immersed in your particular field, like you kind of everything is just like on your in your field. So that's the world that you live in. You're seeing all of that, but then you have to step out. It was like, okay, well, if you're constantly in that world, like everybody kind of knows the same stuff to a certain extent. You got to step outside and connect with people outside of that, because that's where you can present a lot of your value, because they aren't as familiar with that world. So it's a learning tool for them, and it's a teaching opportunity for you, and vice versa. If you step out to another world, whether it's, I don't know, finance, or let's just stick with finance, you go outside of that. Obviously, as someone who has their own LLC and their own company, that stuff is very important, because the Uncle Sam don't play. So you know, you want to manage your money well. You make sure you're paying your taxes. You want to make sure you dot your I's and cross all your T's. And, you know, by connecting with people in that world, you know, they can provide tips and helpful things. You may not be able to at a certain point hire a professional to do all that on its own, but you can gain a lot of valuable information, whether they have a podcast or in the content that they put out and share on their social media. Is tips that you can apply to your business. So you kind of have to expand your horizons and not to kind of just get stuck on the particular field that you're in. So I'm glad you have created that. What a so you're doing those amazing things with Pretty Cool, and you got a lot of support. One thing also that you created that I want to highlight really quickly is Wallercraft. Quickly explain it and what that experience was like.
Sure. So Wallercraft is actually the brainchild of one of my frequent creative collaborators, Cooper Skinner, who, going back to like White Angle, being in a space in the entertainment industry where it's different people, different cultures, working on stories about different people, different cultures. Cooper, who is not a Black person, was working on a narrative podcast that was a Black narrative, a Black experience. And there were so many specific settings that were like, you know, a Red Lobster in the hood, or like girls twerking in a parking lot, where he was kind of like, what sounds are these? Like, what, this isn't something that's in a library. And so I thought it was kind of hilarious, but it also started getting more prevalent. Storytelling, as more diverse stories were being told, it's like, we need these sounds to exist or else we're not going to be able to make this work. And so that's where the idea for Black Walla Pack came from. How can we have sound effects that are accessible and available to everyone to help tell Black stories? So we spent 2 days in the studio with 8 Atlanta actors and actresses. I think everybody's just actors now. And we just were putting them through different scenarios. So it's like, you know, praise and catching the Holy Ghost in church and go, or, you know, at a party, at a restaurant, and just got this really rich sounding Walla that you can tell, like, oh, these are Black people. And so the project is still very much ongoing. Actually, the one play that I mentioned that I did a couple months ago, I used some Black Walla Pack stuff in it. It is a Black narrative. And so, yeah, our hope is to identify other cultures or other ways to capture audio from groups who may not always be represented in stock audio, and to have that content available so that hopefully, as more of those stories are being told, we'll have the support in post to be able to make them told authentically. So it's wacky, but it's necessary.
Very necessary. I'm glad you I'm glad you saw the need for that and made it happen. So it is available for purchase. How can the sound pack? How can people purchase it?
Yes, you can go to wallacraft.com. And yes, Black Walla Pack is there. You can download a sample if you want to, you know, get a little demo first. But yeah, our hope and goal with that, again, is to start representing folks in audio who often aren't represented right now. So stay tuned.
I appreciate you, Kacie. We've covered a lot, highlighted some things. Obviously, there's a lot to everyone's story, so we can't hit on everything in particular, but I do appreciate you sharing what you have shared. This is another full circle moment for us, going back to my introduction to you at Black Pod Fest. And I'm glad you were able to join. But before we close out, how can people find you on all the things, the website, socials? How can they support what you're doing and anything else that you want to highlight that may be upcoming or on the horizon?
Sure thing. So we're at Could Be Pretty Cool on, I think we're only on IG and Threads sometimes, but LinkedIn, very active on there, couldbeprettycool.com. If you happen to be going to Podcast Movement in August, I'll be around. But yeah, always looking for folks to chat with. And as Sidney mentioned, if I see opportunities that I think a creator could benefit from, I just slap it on up on my stories, because that's how so many things that I have received have come to me. Somebody sliding a DM or somebody just posting. And so I think paying it forward is definitely the move. So, yeah.
All right, yeah. Make sure you go check out what she has going on. All things could be pretty cool and beyond. Once again, thank you, Kacie. I appreciate you joining me for today's episode. For those listening, I will catch you on the next episode. Super appreciative to anyone who's listened to this episode or previous episodes. And yeah, I'll catch you on the next one. Thank you for joining us on today's episode. Please don't forget to subscribe to the show and leave us a review. If you'd like to work with me or connect, please go to soundbysid.com and schedule a call. There you can also check out the full list of productions I've worked on. If you'd like to connect on social media, my handle is soundbysid.com on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm Sidney Evans on LinkedIn. Don't forget to follow Beyond the Threshold on Instagram as well. I'll catch you on the next episode.